The bright sun of Proxima B7 rose slowly over the eastern mountains, casting long shadows across the human research camp. The morning air smelled different than Earth, a mix of copper and something like cinnamon. After 3 weeks, Dr. Allen Reeves still wasn't used to it. Allen walked across the main yard watching as the camp came to life. 20 prefab buildings formed a rough circle around a central command post. The walls gleamed silver in the morning light. Solar panels tracked the sun automatically. Allen nodded to engineer Eric Foster, who was fixing a water recycler outside the science lab. "Morning, Doc," Eric said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Ready for the meeting with our bug friends today?" Allen frowned. "Don't call them bugs. The Vexnar are the first intelligent aliens we've ever met. Show some respect." Eric shrugged and went back to his work. Allen continued walking toward the command center where Major Samantha Wright was waiting with her dog, Duke. Duke wasn't an ordinary dog. The German Shepherd had been genetically enhanced with improved senses, strength, and intelligence. His dark brown eyes followed Allen as he approached. Something about those eyes always made Allen think the dog understood everything they said. "He's been acting strange all night," Samantha said, running her hand through Duke's thick fur. "Wouldn't sleep. Kept wanting to patrol the north fence." Allen looked at Duke with interest. "Maybe he smells something we can't." "Maybe," Samantha said. She was tall with short blonde hair and moved with the confidence of someone who had spent 15 years in military service. As head of security, she took every possible threat seriously. "Or maybe he just needs to get used to this planet like the rest of us." Inside the command center, the rest of the leadership team was already gathered. Communications specialist Olivia Martinez sat at her station, adjusting the translation software. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and she barely looked up when they entered. Botanist Kate Miller and Mission Commander Dr. Paul Harris were studying a map on the main screen. "The Vexnar delegation will be here in an hour," Commander Harris said. He was older than the others, with gray hair and a calm voice that people naturally listened to. "This is our 4th meeting. Let's try to make some progress on the mining rights agreement." Kate pointed to a section of the map. "They seem very protective of the northern mountains. All our soil samples show rich deposits of rare minerals there, but they refuse to discuss mining rights for that area." "Maybe there's something sacred about those mountains," Allen suggested. "We need to respect their culture if we want this relationship to work." Commander Harris nodded. "That's why you're leading the science talks, Allen. You understand we need to be careful here." An hour later, the Vexnar delegation arrived. 6 tall figures walked through the main gate, escorted by 2 human security officers. The aliens looked like walking mantises, standing over 7 feet tall on 4 thin legs. Their upper bodies were covered in green-brown plates that reflected the sunlight. 2 sets of arms, one large pair for strength and a smaller, more delicate pair for fine manipulation, moved with strange grace. As soon as they entered the camp, Duke began to growl. Samantha grabbed his collar. "Easy, boy," she whispered, but the dog wouldn't stop. His eyes never left the Vexnar. The lead Vexnar, who called himself Speaker, turned his triangular head toward Duke. His mouth parts clicked rapidly, and what the humans had learned was their version of speech. "Your animal seems upset," the translator on Olivia's tablet said in a flat, computerized voice. "Perhaps it should be contained during our talks." "Duke is a service animal and part of our security team," Samantha said firmly. "He stays with me." Speaker's large compound eyes reflected the sunlight in rainbow patterns. "As you wish. We are ready to continue our discussions." The meeting took place in the largest building in camp. Humans sat on one side of a long table, Vexnar on the other. Duke lay at Samantha's feet but remained tense, occasionally making low growling sounds when the aliens moved. As Allen explained human mining techniques and environmental protections, he noticed something odd. The Vexnar were making small movements, with their smaller arms that didn't match the friendly tone of their translated words. Having studied xenobiology for years, Allen knew that body language often revealed more than words. "We understand your needs," Speaker said through the translator. But the northern mountains have delicate ecosystems. Perhaps we can discuss the western region instead? Commander Harris looked disappointed but nodded. We're willing to be flexible. Our goal is cooperation, not conflict. As the meeting continued, Alan kept watching the small arm movements of the Vexnar. They seemed to be communicating something among themselves that the humans couldn't understand. He made a mental note to review the video recordings later. After 3 hours, the meeting ended with small progress on the western mining area, but no access to the northern mountains. As the Vexnar prepared to leave, Duke suddenly stood up and moved between Samantha and Speaker, his body rigid. "Control your animal," Speaker said. His voice translated with no emotion, but his body posture shifting to what Alan read as alarm. "Duke, stand down," Samantha ordered. The dog obeyed but continued to stare at the aliens. After the Vexnar left, the team gathered again in the command center. "What was that about?" Commander Harris asked, looking at Duke, who was now calmly sitting beside Samantha. "I don't know," Samantha said. "But Duke is trained to detect threats. His senses are much better than ours. If something's bothering him about the Vexnar, I think we should pay attention." Alan nodded slowly. "I noticed their secondary arm movements don't match their words. I think they might be communicating secretly among themselves." Olivia looked up from her computer. "The translation might be missing something. Their language uses clicks, whistles, and movements. We might only be getting part of what they're saying." Commander Harris frowned. "Let's not jump to conclusions. This is humanity's first contact with an alien species. We can't risk creating problems because a dog doesn't like how they smell." As the sun began to set, Alan found Samantha and Duke walking the perimeter fence. The dog was alert, his ears forward as he scanned the darkening landscape. "I think you're right about Duke," Alan said. "There's something about the Vexnar that doesn't add up. The way they refuse to discuss the northern mountains, the way their movements don't match their words." Samantha nodded. "In my experience, when something feels wrong, it usually is wrong." She looked down at Duke, who was now staring into the darkness beyond the fence. "He's been like this since they left. Won't relax." In the distance, the northern mountains were black shapes against the purple sky. Alan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. "I'm going to analyze those videos tonight," he said. "Maybe there's a pattern to their movements we're missing." Duke suddenly turned his head and growled at something they couldn't see in the gathering darkness. Samantha put her hand on her weapon. "Whatever's out there," she said quietly. "I'm glad we have Duke on watch." As they walked back to camp, Duke kept looking over his shoulder, his body tense and ready. A silent guardian against dangers the humans could not yet see. 3 months passed on Proxima B7. The human camp had grown larger with the arrival of 2 supply ships from Earth. There were now 30 people living in the settlement, including new security personnel, scientists, and support staff. The morning, sun shone through the window of the lab where Alan worked. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the screen again. For weeks he had been studying recordings of the Vexnar, trying to decode their secondary arm movements and body language. "Find anything new?" asked Olivia as she entered the lab. She placed a cup of coffee next to his computer. "Thanks," Alan said, taking a sip. "And yes, I think I'm onto something. Their small arms make patterns that don't match what they're saying with their mouth parts. It's like they're having 2 conversations at once." Olivia sat down at her own workstation. "I've been working on updating the translation algorithm. There's a secondary harmonic in their speech that our original program wasn't detecting." Before Alan could respond, the lab door opened again. Major Samantha Wright entered with Duke at her side. The dog looked thinner than before, his eyes alert and watchful. "Duke still not sleeping well?" Alan asked. Samantha shook her head. "He sleeps a few hours during the day, but at night he insists on patrolling. Something's got him worried." "Us, too," Olivia said, pointing to their screens. "We think the Vexnar have been hiding things in their communications." A loud alarm suddenly blared through the camp. Duke stood up, his ears forward, but he didn't bark or seem surprised. "What's that?" Alan asked, standing up quickly. Perimeter alert, Samantha said, already moving toward the door. Northern fence. Come on, Duke. Alan and Olivia followed them outside. Many other camp members were also moving toward the northern section of the fence. When they arrived, they found Eric and 2 security officers examining a section of the fence that appeared damaged. What happened? Commander Harris asked as he joined the group. Fence was cut, Eric said, pointing to clean cuts in the metal mesh. Not torn or broken, cut with a tool. Vexnar? Asked Samantha. Who else could it be? Eric replied. Unless you think the local wildlife suddenly learned how to use wire cutters? Commander Harris frowned. Let's not jump to conclusions. The Vexnar have been peaceful so far. This could be simple vandalism by a different species we haven't met yet. Or it could be the start of something worse, Samantha said. First, our communications system has random outages, then sensors report phantom readings, and now this. Duke was sniffing around the cut fence, his body language tense. Suddenly he stopped and looked up at the distant mountains to the north, a low growl forming in his throat. What is it, boy? Samantha asked, following his gaze. There was nothing visible but the mountains and forests. Later that day, a group gathered in the command center. Commander Harris stood at the head of the table looking concerned. The monthly supply ship arrives in 2 weeks, he said. I want a full security report to send back to Earth Command. If there are potential threats here, they need to know. Kate Miller raised her hand. I need to report something. Plants from our Earth crop samples are missing from the greenhouse. At first I thought animals were getting in, but the samples aren't eaten. They're just gone. Someone is taking them? Alan asked. It looks that way, Kate said. And only the edible plants, not the ornamental ones. Greg Patterson, a new security officer who had arrived on the last supply ship, spoke up. Duke led me to something interesting yesterday. He placed a small device on the table. It was about the size of a coin made of a greenish metal. What is it? Commander Harris asked, picking it up. Some kind of camera or sensor, Greg said. Found it buried near the water purification system. It's not human technology. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. This is Vexnar tech, Alan finally said. I've seen similar designs in their equipment. They're spying on us, Samantha said flatly. Commander Harris put the device down carefully. We need more evidence before we make accusations. The Vexnar are supposed to visit tomorrow for trade discussions. I don't want to damage our relationship without proof. As the meeting ended, Greg approached Samantha and Duke. Major, can I speak with you privately? Samantha nodded and they walked outside with Duke following closely. Duke seems to trust you, Samantha observed. Most of the camp residents kept their distance from the serious-looking German shepherd. I grew up with working dogs, Greg explained. I think he knows that. He paused, looking around to make sure no one could hear them. I've been following Duke on his night patrols. He always goes to the north fence and stares at the mountains. Last night I brought night vision goggles. And? Samantha prompted. There's movement out there. A lot of it. That evening, Greg and Samantha took Duke to a small hill overlooking the northern valley. They brought binoculars and night vision equipment. As darkness fell, Duke grew more alert, his eyes fixed on a specific area in the distance. There, Greg whispered, adjusting his night vision goggles. About 2 miles out near that large rock formation. Samantha looked through her own goggles and felt her blood run cold. In the green-tinted view, she could see dozens of Vexnar moving in formation. They carried what looked like weapons and were performing what appeared to be organized drills. That's a military exercise, she said quietly. They've been doing this for at least a week, Greg said. Every night. Duke knew something was wrong before any of us. Samantha looked down at the dog who sat calmly between them, watching the distant Vexnar with unwavering attention. She reached out and patted his head. Good boy, Duke, you were right all along. The next morning, Samantha and Greg presented their findings to Commander Harris, showing him recorded footage of the Vexnar night activities. This is concerning, Harris admitted, but still not definitive. They might have their own security, concerns we don't know about. Sir, Samantha said firmly, with all due respect, this is a military buildup. Combined with the fence cutting, the missing plants, and the spy device, we need to take this seriously. Before Harris could respond, Olivia burst into the office. "I've cracked it," she said excitedly. "The secondary harmonic in their speech. When translated properly, it changes everything they've been telling us." She played a recording of their last meeting with the Vexnar. The translation was very different from what they had heard before. "The humans remain ignorant of our true intentions," Speaker's voice said through the new translation. "Continue preparations while we maintain the illusion of peace talks." Commander Harris's face darkened. "Get everyone to the command center now. We need to prepare for the worst." As they left the office, Duke stood at the window, his eyes fixed on the northern mountains, where unseen dangers gathered in growing numbers. The command center was packed with people. All 30 camp members stood in tight groups, talking in low, worried voices. Commander Harris raised his hands for silence. "As many of you have heard, we have evidence that the Vexnar may not be as friendly as they've pretended to be," he said. "Major Wright will explain what we know." Samantha stepped forward. The tall security chief looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. Duke sat beside her, alert as always. "For the past 3 months, Duke has been showing signs of distrust toward the Vexnar," she began. "We now believe he was sensing danger that humans couldn't detect." She pointed to a screen showing night vision footage of Vexnar military exercises. "This was recorded last night just 2 miles north of our camp." Worried murmurs filled the room. Alan stood up. "We've also discovered that the Vexnar communication has a second layer we weren't detecting. Olivia has updated our translation software." Olivia played several recordings showing how the Vexnar had been saying one thing while secretly communicating plans among themselves. Commander Harris spoke again when the recordings finished. "Despite this evidence, I'm not convinced we need to abandon the mission. The Vexnar may have legitimate security concerns of their own." Greg Patterson stepped forward. "Sir, with all respect, we found their spy device in our water system. They cut our fence. They're stealing our crop samples. And now we know they're running military drills while lying to our faces. What more proof do we need?" The room divided into heated discussion. Half the camp wanted to call Earth for immediate evacuation. The other half, led by Commander Harris, wanted to continue diplomatic efforts. "The nearest Earthship is weeks away," Harris reminded them. "If we make accusations and they turn out to be wrong, we could ruin humanity's first contact with an alien species." Alan wasn't sure which side was right. As a scientist, he wanted more data before making conclusions. But as Duke watched the debate with his intelligent eyes, Alan couldn't help but trust the dog's instincts. The meeting ended with a compromise. They would increase security measures but continue with tomorrow's scheduled meeting with the Vexnar. Meanwhile, Olivia would send an encrypted message to Earth Command explaining their concerns. Later that evening, Alan found Samantha and Greg setting up additional security cameras around the camp perimeter. "Need help?" he asked. "Sure," Greg said, handing him a small camera. "These run on a separate power system from the main grid. If our power goes out, these will still work." "You really think they might attack?" Alan asked. Samantha checked her weapon before answering. "I think we need to be ready for anything. Duke hasn't relaxed in days." Alan looked at Duke, who stood staring northward as usual. "What does he sense that we don't? Is it smell? Sound?" "Maybe both," Greg suggested. "The enhanced dogs like Duke can detect chemical changes at parts per billion. If the Vexnar release pheromones when they're aggressive or planning attacks, he'd know." As night fell, the camp became quiet. Extra guards patrolled the fence line. Automated defense turrets had been activated, their sensors scanning for movement. In the lab, Alan worked late, studying Vexnar biology from the samples they had collected. The door opened, and Dr. Paul Chen entered. As the camp's chief medical officer, he had been mostly quiet during the earlier debate. "Find anything useful?" Paul asked, looking over Alan's shoulder at the screen. "Maybe," Alan said. "The Vexnar brain structure is unusual. Their neural pathways show signs of what might be a collective consciousness." "You mean like a hive mind?" Paul asked. "Not exactly. More like they can form temporary neural networks with others of their species when in close proximity." "It could. Explain how they coordinate so well in groups." Paul frowned. If they can think as a group during combat, that would make them very dangerous opponents. Alan nodded slowly. Exactly what I was thinking. In the command center, Olivia worked on her communication system. The standard transmitter could send messages to Earth, but they took weeks to arrive. She had been developing a new quantum communicator that might allow instant communication, but it wasn't ready yet. How close are you? Commander Harris asked, watching her work. Maybe 80%, she replied. But without the right parts, I can't finish it. Keep trying, he said. If things go bad, we'll need to reach Earth quickly. Outside, the night grew darker. Stars filled the alien sky, different constellations than those seen from Earth. Linda Weber led the night security team on their rounds. 4 guards with night vision equipment walked the perimeter, checking sensors and watching for movement. Duke had refused his dinner again. He sat at the north fence line, his body still but his eyes constantly moving. Samantha sat beside him, her rifle across her lap. You should try to sleep, Greg said, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Samantha and sat down on Duke's other side. Can't sleep knowing what's out there, she replied, taking a sip. Duke hasn't slept properly in days, but he's still more alert than any of us. Greg reached out and gently stroked Duke's back. The dog didn't move or look away from his watch, but his tail gave a single small wag of acknowledgement. He likes you, Samantha said with surprise. He doesn't warm up to many people. We understand each other, Greg said simply. In his quarters, Commander Harris sat alone thinking. Had he made a mistake by insisting on continuing diplomatic relations? If the Vexnar were planning an attack, he had put the entire camp at risk. But if they weren't and he called for evacuation, he might destroy humanity's first peaceful contact with aliens. He stood up and looked out his window. In the distance, he could see Duke's shape, still and watchful at the fence line. The commander made his decision. He would trust the dog's instincts over his own hopes for peaceful relations. As the hours of darkness passed, the camp settled into an uneasy quiet. Sensors monitored the surrounding area. Guards walked their routes. And Duke maintained his vigil, never moving from his post, his eyes fixed on dangers only he could sense. In the northern mountains, hidden from human eyes, hundreds of Vexnar gathered their weapons and waited for the signal to attack. The first hint of dawn colored the eastern sky when Duke suddenly got to his feet. His ears stood straight up, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Samantha, who had stayed with him all night, was instantly alert. What is it, boy? She whispered, raising her rifle. Greg, who had fallen asleep nearby, woke up at the sound of Duke's growl. Something's coming, he said, grabbing his own weapon. Duke's growl grew louder, his eyes fixed on the northern darkness beyond the fence. Samantha activated her comm unit. All security personnel, possible contact approaching from the north. This is not a drill. Before she could say more, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Seconds later, all the lights in the camp went out. "EMP!" Greg shouted. "They're using electromagnetic pulses to knock out our power." All around the camp, alarms began to sound as backup generators kicked in. The main systems were down, but emergency power came online, casting dim red lighting across the buildings. Duke exploded into action, barking loudly and running along the fence line. His warning came just in time. Dark shapes rushed toward the camp from multiple directions. The Vexnar attack had begun. "All personnel to defense positions," Samantha yelled into her comm unit. "We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack." The automated defense turrets powered up on backup systems and began firing at the approaching Vexnar. Bright flashes lit up the pre-dawn darkness as laser pulses struck alien bodies. But for every Vexnar that fell, 3 more took its place. In the command center, Commander Harris quickly organized the camp's defense. "Olivia, keep working on that quantum communicator. We need to reach Earth now," he ordered. "Everyone else, grab a weapon and get to your assigned positions." Scientists, engineers, and support staff who had never expected to fight grabbed pulse rifles from the emergency armory. They moved to windows in defensive positions, faces pale but determined. Alan ran to the lab where Paul Chen was gathering medical supplies. "We need to use what we know about their biology," Alan said quickly. Their neural connection only works at close range. If we can keep them separated, they can't form their group mind. Paul nodded, understanding immediately. I'll tell the defense teams aim for their antenna structures first. Outside, the battle intensified. Small flying drones appeared above the Vexnar forces, diving toward the camp's defenses. Several exploded against the automated turrets, destroying them in bright flashes. Suicide drones, Greg shouted, firing at one as it approached. The drone exploded in midair, sending shrapnel in all directions. Duke moved like a shadow through the chaos. The enhanced dog darted between buildings, barking warnings seconds before Vexnar appeared. His actions gave defenders precious time to prepare, saving lives again and again. The first Vexnar reached the fence line. They were different from the ones the humans had met during peace talks. These warriors wore armor over their exoskeletons and carried weapons that fired some kind of energy pulse. Keep them back from the fence, Samantha ordered. Don't let them breach the perimeter. Linda Weber and her night security team held the eastern section, firing steadily at the approaching aliens. There's too many, she called over the comm. Unit, we can't hold them much longer. As if to prove her point, a section of fence suddenly exploded. Vexnar warriors poured through the gap, their mandibles clicking rapidly as they communicated with each other. Greg's secondary camera system activated in the command center, showing Commander Harris the true scope of the attack. There are hundreds of them, he said in shock. We're completely surrounded. Despite the overwhelming numbers, the humans fought back with desperate courage. Alan joined Paul at a defensive position near the science lab, both men firing at approaching Vexnar. Aim for the base of their necks, Alan shouted to nearby defenders. That's where their main neural cluster is located. The advice spread quickly. Human defenders began targeting the weak spot, and more Vexnar fell. But still they came, wave after wave. Duke seemed to be everywhere at once. The dog moved faster than seemed possible, attacking Vexnar with precise lunges at their weak points. His enhanced strength and intelligence made him a deadly force against the insectoid attackers. Inside the lab, Olivia worked frantically on the quantum communicator. I'm close, she told Commander Harris over the comm unit. Just a few more minutes. We may not have a few more minutes, he replied grimly, watching as another section of fence was breached. The eastern section fell first. Linda and her team were forced to retreat as dozens of Vexnar swarmed through. Linda found herself cut off from the others, surrounded by clicking, advancing aliens. I'm surrounded, she shouted into her comm unit. East gate is overrun. Duke heard her call. The dog immediately changed direction, racing across the camp toward Linda's position. He crashed into the group of Vexnar surrounding her, teeth finding alien flesh with unerring accuracy. The sudden attack caused confusion among the Vexnar. Their coordinated movements faltered as Duke disrupted their neural connection. Linda saw her chance and ran, firing behind her as she moved toward the central buildings. Duke followed, blood now staining his fur from multiple wounds. A Vexnar energy weapon had grazed his side, but he showed no sign of slowing down. Duke's hit, Linda called as they reached safety. Samantha turned, fear crossing her face for the first time that night. How bad? She asked, moving to examine the dog. He's still fighting, Linda said with admiration. Saved my life out there. As dawn broke fully over the camp, the situation was grim. Multiple breaches in the perimeter meant Vexnar warriors were inside the camp itself. Humans had fallen back to defensive positions around the central buildings. Many were wounded or dead. In the command center, Commander Harris made a difficult decision. Prepare to destroy all research data, he ordered. If we can't hold out, we can't let our technology fall into their hands. Just then, Olivia's voice came over the comm unit, excited despite the chaos. It works. The quantum communicator is online. We have a direct link to Earth Command. For the first time since the attack began, a flicker of hope appeared on the commander's tired face. Patch me through, he ordered. Tell them we need immediate assistance. Outside, the Vexnar gathered for what appeared to be a final push. Their leader, larger than the others and wearing ornate armor, directed forces with precise movements of all four arms. Duke, despite his injuries, took up position at the front line of defense, his eyes never leaving the Vexnar commander. The alien forces prepared to charge. The brave dog stood his ground, a silent guardian determined to protect his human companions to the very end. The Vexnar commander raised his upper arms and his warriors fell silent. The morning sun now fully lit the battlefield that had once been a peaceful research camp. Bodies of humans and aliens lay scattered across the ground. Buildings smoked from weapons fire. The remaining humans had formed a tight defensive circle around the command center. "Final attack positions," Samantha ordered, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "Remember your training. Make every shot count." Duke stood at the front line, his fur matted with blood from his wounds. The dog's eyes never left the Vexnar commander. Greg knelt beside Duke, one hand on the dog's back. "You've done enough, boy," Greg said softly. "Fall back now." But Duke didn't move. Instead, he made a sound none of them had heard before, not a growl or a bark, but something between a whine and a hum. Other defenders nearby felt a strange sensation, like a mild electric current running through their bodies. In the command center, Commander Harris spoke urgently into the quantum communicator. "This is Earth Research Outpost Proxima 7. We are under heavy attack by Vexnar forces. Request immediate military assistance." The voice that replied was clear, as if the speaker were in the same room rather than hundreds of light years away. "This is Admiral Jack Wilson, Earth Combined Fleet. We've been monitoring your situation. The UES Intrepid is stationed at Jupiter and can reach you using the new jump drive. Stand by." "How long will that take?" Harris asked. "The Intrepid can be there in 3 hours. Can you hold that long?" Harris looked at the security feeds showing the massive Vexnar force preparing for their final assault. "We'll try." "Harris out." He turned to Olivia. 3 hours. We need to hold them off for 3 hours." Olivia's face was pale but determined. "We'll hold." Outside, the Vexnar commander gave the signal. With a collective screech that chilled human blood, the alien warriors surged forward in perfect coordination, moving like parts of a single organism. The human defenders opened fire. Pulse rifles and remaining automated turrets cut down the first wave of attackers, but more followed immediately. The Vexnar had numbers on their side and they knew it. "They're going to overwhelm us," Linda shouted, firing steadily at the approaching aliens. Then something strange happened. Duke suddenly barked 3 times, sharp, commanding sounds. To the humans' amazement, they found themselves moving in new defensive patterns without being told. Defenders shifted positions, creating stronger firing lines. Those with injuries fell back while those still at full strength moved forward. "What's happening?" Alan asked as he found himself moving to a better position without consciously deciding to do so. Paul looked at Duke with sudden understanding. "It's him. Somehow he's coordinating us like the Vexnar coordinate with each other." Duke's strange humming sound grew louder. Greg, who was closest to the dog, felt the strongest connection. "He's using his enhanced brain to link with us," Greg said in wonder. "He's creating our own version of their hive mind." The effect was immediate and powerful. The human defenders now moved with the same coordinated precision as the Vexnar. They anticipated attacks, covered each other perfectly, and made every shot count. Samantha felt Duke's presence in her mind, not controlling, but connecting, sharing, his heightened senses and tactical awareness with all of them. She knew where every defender was without looking. She could sense the Vexnar movements before they happened. "Push them back from the west entrance," she ordered, and the defenders moved as one, focusing fire exactly where it was needed. The Vexnar commander noticed the change in human tactics. His forces had expected easy victory against individual fighters, but now faced something unexpected. Humans fighting with collective intelligence. For the next hour, the battle raged across the campgrounds. Buildings were destroyed, equipment ruined, but the human defenders held their position around the command center. Duke maintained the strange connection between them all, his eyes glowing with intensity. Inside the quantum communicator room, Commander Harris received an update from Earth. "Intrepid has jumped. Estimated arrival in 2 hours. How are you holding?" Still here, Harris replied grimly. But I don't know for how much longer. The Vexnar commander, frustrated by the unexpected resistance, ordered his remaining forces to concentrate on a single point. All Vexnar warriors converged on the southern wall of the command center, hitting it with concentrated weapons fire. They're breaking through, Olivia shouted as the wall began to crack. Duke barked again, and through their mental link, all defenders immediately understood his plan. Half moved to strengthen the southern defense, while others circled around behind to flank the concentrated Vexnar force. The aliens, so focused on breaching the wall, didn't notice as Greg led a small team around to their rear. When both groups opened fire simultaneously, the Vexnar were caught in deadly crossfire. For a moment it seemed the humans might push them back completely. Then the wall finally collapsed, and Vexnar warriors poured through the gap. Inside the command center, combat became close and desperate. Humans fought with whatever weapons they had: pulse rifles, tools, even pieces of broken equipment. Duke moved through the chaos like a ghost, attacking Vexnar with precise ferocity, always targeting their neural centers. The Vexnar commander entered through the breach, his tall form towering over the humans. He spotted Commander Harris and moved toward him, weapon raised. Duke saw the threat. Despite his many wounds and obvious exhaustion, the dog launched himself at the Vexnar leader, teeth finding the vulnerable spot where head met thorax. The alien screamed in pain and fury, trying to dislodge Duke. The mental link between the humans wavered as Duke focused all his energy on this single, crucial attack. "Help Duke!" Samantha shouted, firing at the Vexnar commander. Greg and Alan rushed forward, adding their attacks to Duke's. Together they brought down the massive alien leader. As he fell, confusion spread through the Vexnar ranks. Without their commander's neural guidance, their perfect coordination faltered. "Push them back now," Samantha ordered. The remaining defenders surged forward with renewed energy, driving the disorganized Vexnar out of the command center. Outside, a new sound filled the air, the roar of engines descending from the sky. Through breaks in the smoke and dust, they could see a massive ship with Earth Alliance markings. The UES Intrepid had arrived far earlier than expected. Drop pods rained down from the ship, each holding armed Marines in combat armor. They landed among the Vexnar forces with devastating effect. Earth Command pushed the Intrepid's engines past safety limits, Harris said, watching the feed from outside cameras. They got here in just over an hour instead of 3. The remaining Vexnar tried to retreat, but found their escape routes blocked. Greg's team had circled behind them completely, cutting off their path back to the mountains. Duke's tactical guidance had positioned human fighters precisely where they needed to be. 2 hours later, the battle was over. Marine medics treated the wounded humans while combat teams secured the area. Of the 30 camp members, 22 had survived, many with injuries. Captain Natalie Rodriguez of the Intrepid met with Commander Harris in what remained of the command center. "How did you hold out against such overwhelming odds?" she asked. "My tactical officer says you were outnumbered at least 10-1. Harris pointed to where Duke lay on a medical blanket, being treated for his many wounds. "Ask him. Somehow, he linked our minds together, gave us the same advantage the Vexnar had." Duke's eyes were open, watching everything. Despite his injuries, his tail thumped weakly against the blanket when Samantha knelt beside him. "Good boy, Duke," she said softly, gently stroking his head. "The best boy." Alan approached, looking at readings on a small scanner. "The effect is fading now, but it was remarkable. Duke's enhanced brain somehow created a field that linked our neural patterns. We became a temporary hive mind, just like the Vexnar." Captain Rodriguez shook her head in amazement. "So the stories we'll tell about this day are true. They ambushed the human camp, the pet was standing watch, and no one escaped." "No one," Samantha agreed, looking at the captured Vexnar being loaded onto transport ships. "And now the entire galaxy will know. Never underestimate humans and their loyal companions." Duke closed his eyes at last, finally allowing himself to rest, his mission complete.